What's up, everybody? Justin Nault here. I am joined today by a very special guest who is in charge of literally my favorite nonprofit organization that I have ever come across in all my years in the health and wellness space. I want to welcome to the show, Juliet Starrett. Juliet, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks so much, Justin. I'm so excited to talk to you.
Yeah, you too. It has been since, we've communicated via email and such, but we actually haven't seen each other since our epic scavenger hunt victory in a random hotel in Atlanta.
I know. Yeah, that was awesome. That was awesome. You know, I have to say that it was worth it for me to go to that conference just to meet you and a couple other people. So you just never know. You never know what's going to happen when you go to those things, right? You're like, am I going to go and learn anything or meet anybody? But I met you and a couple other people that I will know for life.
Yeah, for sure. And I was so new to the game at that point. I had the older version of my protein powder, Perfect Paleo Powder, was still the first formula with my little 2-pound tub that we sponsored this same event. And I definitely had a fanboy moment when you showed up. I was like, oh, StandUp Kids. And I was so taken back by it. And then we got put on the same team and I was all pumped. It was great.
That was awesome. That was awesome. It was awesome for me too. And such a fan of all the work you do and what like a deep presence you've been in the space for so long as well. So
thank you very much
for your steadfast support of StandUp Kids. Really, like, thank you so much.
Oh, absolutely. I love it. And we're going to jump into all that stuff. But so first things first, just for people who may not know you or may not be familiar, it's been really fun to kind of poke around and look into you more outside of how I know you personally, just to see, your career is quite the career history, both inside and outside of the health and wellness space, which has been interesting to see. So it looks like it started with rowing, there's fishing, there's law school, there's CrossFit, there's writing books. I mean, it's very, very inspiring. So can we start at the beginning and kind of give people a feel for, what is it that you do now and how you came to be so passionate about health and wellness in particular?
Sure. I would like to, first of all, give you props for being the first person to ever dig out of the archives that I was a fishing counselor. I mean, that's actually like no one's ever found that before.
Really?
Yeah. So I was a camp counselor for 1 year of my life when I was 18, or not 1 year, one summer. It was a summer job right after high school, but before college. And I randomly ended up being the fishing counselor, even though I had no fishing background or fishing experience. So anyway, I just think it's funny that you somehow found that in like the Juliet Starrett archive. It's hilarious. I actually forget that I did that too. Anyway, to answer your actual question, today I am the CEO of both MobilityWOD and San Francisco Crossfit. San Francisco Crossfit was the 50th CrossFit affiliate. And because there's turnover and things change in CrossFit, I think now we're like technically the 21st CrossFit affiliate. Kelly and I started the gym in 2005 after kind of just happening upon the CrossFit website in 2003. I was actually practicing law at the time and Kelly was in physical therapy school. And we were in this weird transition in our sort of athletic careers where before going to law school, we had both been professional athletes. I was on the whitewater team, so was Kelly, and he also paddled on the U.S. canoe and kayak team. So we both had these like stints as professional athletes sort of in our 20s. I then retired, went to law school. Kelly retired, went to physical therapy school, and we had this weird sort of transitional phase in our life where we were like going to the gym and still wanted to be athletes and be fit and healthy, but like didn't really know what to do. Like we'd go to the gym and Stairmaster and like squat in the rack, and we just didn't really have like a plan. So we were training and going to the gym like 5 or 6 days a week, but we were definitely uninspired. We're like athletes, and we still did all our playing. We still mountain biked and skied and did all that stuff, but like on a day-to-day basis, we were just going to like a sad, uninspiring gym. And Kelly was doing some research on like Olympic lifting with a kettlebell in 2003, and somehow randomly came across the CrossFit website, which he immediately shared with me, and I thought was like a neoconservative military cult because there was tons of like early, like it definitely just didn't really immediately look like a fitness website to me. I was like, what is this? This is weird. Yeah. And but we started doing some of the workouts at our local like Globo gym. And our eyes like lit up because here we'd both been professional athletes. We're super sporty. I'd been like a Division I rower at UC Berkeley, and Kelly had been on 2 different national teams. We'd both been on national teams. I'd already won 2 world championships. So we're like, yeah, we're good athletes. And then we start doing these CrossFit workouts and we get absolutely crushed.
Right.
Like and I'm sure a lot of people have felt this when they first found CrossFit too. Like you think you're an athlete and then you come and you realize, yeah, you certainly have some athletic strengths, but also like the amount of holes that we both saw in our like general fitness were many and gigantic. And I think that's what sucked us in so early on, because I think all of a sudden we're like, oh my God, like we have so much work to do. We have so much to learn. We're so behind. We just started doing CrossFit workouts at our Globo gym. Then Kelly went onto Craigslist and bought like $300 worth of like metal plates and a weird like hexagonal shaped barbell on Craigslist. And we started doing some workouts in our backyard. And then that sort of, some of our neighbors and friends started coming. And so somehow we like created this little community, and we're doing these CrossFit workouts in our backyard with like some super janky equipment. And then at some point we realized that, you know, more people wanted to join us. We couldn't keep doing it in our backyard in the middle of San Francisco. And so we actually, and we also like, I think we had some sense that like there was something to this CrossFit thing.
Yeah.
Now keep in mind that we didn't necessarily start San Francisco CrossFit to think it would be like a business that made money. Mm-hmm. We definitely were like, there's something to this. We feel like we're part of an emergent phenomenon. We love doing these workouts. We want to keep doing them ourselves. We want to create a space for people to do them. So we started the gym in 2005, which was sort of crazy because Kelly was still in physical therapy school and we had a 6-month-old baby, and I was practicing law full time at this point. But you know, we were into it. And then a couple of years later, Kelly left his traditional physical therapy job and started what is now, or what was lovingly known as the Pain Cave at San Francisco CrossFit, which is a little container where you could go in and see Kelly for physical therapy. And he started seeing like the same 10 problems over and over and over again. And he'd come home at night and our sort of dinner table conversation would be like, hey, so every single person I saw today took time off work, paid me $150, you know, had to sit on the table in the Pain Cave to get worked on by me, only for me to tell them like their quads are stiff, or, you know, maybe they need to mobilize their calves, or maybe they just didn't understand how their shoulder worked. And if someone told them that, then they wouldn't like have this ongoing nagging pain. And so that was sort of the birth of MobilityWOD. I think Kelly thought, man, all these people like should have some tools to be able to take care of their own bodies. Right. And so that's how the mobility project began, where we committed to make 365 videos in a year, which ended up taking us about 18 months in reality. But we started the mobility project on YouTube. As I'm sure you've seen from the old school videos, it was, it was rough. It was not good audio. It was all filmed in our garage by me, and I am a terrible camera person. I have a lot of strengths, but one of them is not being good at running the camera. But we saw like a problem that we wanted to fix. And that was sort of the birth of MobilityWOD. And now, since that time, obviously we've written 5 books, and MobilityWOD has become like a real business, where people subscribe to our content, and we teach, coaches how to be better at coaching, and Kelly travels around and does speaking engagements. So it's sort of blown into this way bigger thing than we ever planned. I mean, we really just did sort of see that athletes and coaches and just recreational athletes, whether they were in CrossFit or not, really didn't understand how their bodies worked and had absolutely no tools in their toolkit to kind of tinker with their own body and try to fix themselves. So that's sort of the birth of MobilityWOD, and then obviously San Francisco CrossFit. So I guess the rest is history.
Yeah. How's San Francisco CrossFit right now? What does it look like? I'm assuming you guys, I don't know. I'm actually not familiar with like how many members you have and coaches, things like that.
Did we just finish our 13th year or start we just finished our 13th year of owning a CrossFit, which it turns out in like small business ownership, 13 years is like, an eternity.
Yeah, it really is.
But yeah, we are proud that we are continuing to thrive as a CrossFit gym in San Francisco, especially given that we live in the most expensive city in the entire country.
Sure.
But we have around 300 to 325 members, give or take, depending on the month. We have a really thriving personal training business. And then we also have several in-house physical therapists who work with clients sort of returning to sport and, who are dealing with nagging injuries and pain and that kind of thing. So San Francisco CrossFit is a thriving community. So
that's beautiful.
It continues on. It's great.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it seems like, at least for a brief period of time, you actually came out of retirement recently, sort of, in your professional athletic career, right? So tell us about the IRF, right, in Argentina?
Yes. Yeah. So so it was the World Whitewater Rafting Championships, and I competed for 5 years as a national team athlete between 1997 and 2000. And during that time, we won all the national championships and 2 world championships in 1997 and 1998 with a team of 6 women. We all retired in 2000 to go and have regular jobs and regular lives, but we've remained friends ever since. Mm-hmm. And just this past winter, we were all sitting around having, coffee and talking. And one of our friends realized that there had been, because this whole raft racing thing continued on after us. And I will say with a caveat that in the United States, it is like a super fringe sport. Like nobody knows about it and does it. Not nobody, but it's really small and very fringe. But it's interesting because in other parts of the world, in many countries in Europe, Australia, Japan, some parts of Central and South America, it's like a full-on professional sport where your government pays you to be an athlete in the sport. So nobody's ever heard of it here in the US, but it's like a big sport in other places. And actually there's a push to have it become an Olympic sport. Who knows if that'll ever happen, but that's just a little backstory on the sport. So we did this for 5 years. Last winter, we were all sitting around having coffee, excuse me. And one of my teammates, sorry, let me have some water. One of my teammates noticed that there had been a national championship and no Masters women's team for the US had showed up to try to qualify for the Worlds. So a bunch of men's Masters teams showed up and a team qualified and were headed to the Worlds in Argentina. But no US Masters teams even competed. Obviously, there's not a lot of depth in the sport. And, and so, and I will add, when we competed in this sport in the late 90s, there was only an open division. And now there's Masters divisions, there's an open division, a U23, and a U19 division. So it's really grown. So we didn't, we just thought, well, let's call the organizers and say, hey, you guys might remember us from the 90s. We were like a big team in the 90s, and there's no US team that's qualified. Can we come and represent the US at this World Championships? And we weren't really that optimistic. We thought that they would want us to qualify in some formal way. And they knew who we were, and they're like, yes, please come. So all of a sudden we what started off as like a coffee table conversation, ended up being like, okay, we are now, this was last February. Okay, we are now going to Argentina the first weekend of November, and we're going to be competing in the World Championships. So, it was honestly all done kind of on a whim. None of us live near each other. Couple of our teammates live in Truckee, one in Napa, and then I'm in San Francisco. So we were only able to get together as a team a couple times, actually practice together. And then the rest of us just trained on our own. And thankfully everybody has continued to be kind of aggro and trains all the time anyway. But we really were just going down there as like a team reunion and to go see a cool part of the world we've never been to, and to just go have an adventure. Honestly, that was our agenda. Yeah. And so we show up, and there are, I think, 65 teams from 37 countries, and it's this big, huge event with, hundreds of athletes. And we ended up winning the whole thing.
Yeah.
Not the whole thing. I mean, we ended up winning the Masters division.
Yes, sure.
But it was an unexpected thing to win. Although my husband would say, yeah, you guys are crazy. You're all like so competitive. I'm not surprised you won it all.
Mm-hmm.
But honestly, I went in with like no expectation about winning. I just thought like, I'm going to go see a cool river and get together with my old teammates. And I'm going to meet all these other athletes from all over the world and, you know, go see Patagonia again. And, you know, there were all these other reasons. So, so much to our surprise as a team, we ended up winning the overall gold medal for the Masters division. So,
yeah.
So that's my latest foray into athletics.
So it's like 2 world titles, what, 20 years apart?
We were world championships in 1997 and 1998, and then again in 2018. Isn't that funny?
It's astounding, especially given the fact, like you say, like other countries, like, I mean, they put money and time and effort into this thing. You're like, oh, we got together a couple times, practiced a little bit. It's insane.
Yeah. I mean, after we started doing well in the competition, I thought, oh, okay, like I probably shouldn't mention anymore that we haven't really trained together as a team because we will look like assholes.
Yeah, so that's insulting.
Yeah. So we kept that to ourselves. So, so it was cool too. You know, there's, one of the events, which is the most challenging event, is the slalom, which is for those who've ever watched like kayak slalom in the Olympics. It's the same thing where you're on a big, huge river and you have to make it through these gates and boat. And it's honestly the most technical and challenging of all the events that you do at the Whitewater World Championships. And we won that event for the Masters, but we would have gotten 5th overall in the open women's division too. So we were pretty stoked on that.
Wow.
Because, you know, all those people are like 25.
Yeah.
And, you know, and most of them just do this as their sport and maybe have like a side job. And we have like many real jobs, and I have 2 kids and people have kids. And so, you know, we're just in a different place in our life.
Yeah, for sure. That it's the entrepreneur hustle. It does.
Yeah.
You and Kelly both amaze me looking at your Instagrams and stuff. Just like, holy shit, man. I'm like, I slept 9 hours last night. My deadlift workout yesterday was quite difficult. Like, I need rest, you know?
Don't be silly, Justin. I know what you're up to, and it's a lot of things, but I will tell you that Kelly and I do a lot of things, and we're kind of crazy, but we are like you, like we, one of the things we hold very dear is our sleep.
Yes.
So we try to, you know, despite all the crazy things going on, we definitely try to make sure we're getting like 8 hours. And if we're lucky, 9 hours of sleep a night.
Yeah, I try to teach people that a lot too. It's the idea of, you know, a lot of times I make jokes about it, but the day in life really with the entrepreneur thing, especially type A's and us agros, is you just have to be very, very protective of your time, because even with the amount of work I had, like the work I do in a day is pretty tremendous, because Clovis is essentially like a one-man show type situation. And
Right.
it's just the whole like Cal Newport idea of deep work. It's like, okay, if you stay away from your phone for a little while and really get the work that needs to get done, and then get the workout done. Like my workouts are non-negotiable. Those happen in the morning and you know, I know all the research of like hormones, and sometimes afternoon workouts are better and stuff, but what's the one thing that's going to make me do it consistently? And that's what I do. I get it done in the morning. It's just, if you set your schedule up, you can get all the things in, including 8 to 9 hours of sleep if you're not scrolling Instagram in bed at 11 p.m. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So, you know, I just did the coolest thing, which I totally recommend. I watched the 60 Minutes episode on Sunday night, and it was all about screen time and how it's affecting kids.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe I'm like 500 years behind in terms of my understanding of technology, but now there's this thing, and I have an iPhone, so I don't know how it works on an Android phone, but there's this thing in the settings on your iPhone that's called screen time.
Mm-hmm.
And you can go in and set your screen time. So I set my screen time this week, not screen time. You can actually set limits on your apps. So I set a limit on all my social media apps to 30 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And I recommend everybody do this as an experiment, because I had a friend come over and I said, oh, I just put my social media on 30 minutes. And they're like, and I was like, do you want me to do it to your phone? And he says, well, sure. But you know, I'm probably not spending more than 30 minutes. And I get onto his phone, and he'd been spending an hour and 45 minutes a day on social media. So, you know, if you add that up over a week, you're like, okay, so you spend an average of, let's say, round up 2 hours a day on social media. That's 14 hours a week on social media. And that's probably on the low end for a lot of people, right?
Yeah.
And if I look at like the trajectory of my week and think about what I want to accomplish, I think, man, like I don't want to spend 14 hours of my week on social media.
No.
Obviously there's like a fair amount of social media we have to do for our work, but you know, and we have people who help us with that. So we don't have to always be we're not always the one on our social media doing the actual posting,
Right.
but it's really interesting. Anyway, I totally digressed on the social media thing, but I'm only 4 days into my experiment, but it was interesting yesterday because by 5:30, I was like, okay, I have 5 minutes left on my social media. Like,
Yep.
what do I want to look at and what's important? And then that's it. Like, I didn't look at it anymore. I was
Yeah.
done.
Well, and that's the thing is it's so easy. And I love that the conversation took this direction because it's so important. I talk about it all the time. And the thing is, you have every excuse in the world to be on social media. I have every excuse in the world to be on social media. And this screen time thing, I'm a tech nerd. So it's actually brand new. It just came out with a new iOS 12 update. So that wasn't always there.
Right.
This screen tracking thing, Instagram has it built in. You can see the number of minutes you spend just on Instagram. That's within the app. So people are unaware of these features. And my question becomes, okay, let's say I was spending an hour a day on social media and I run all of my personal social media and I run all of Clovis's social media. So if the average person is spending hours and they have like a normal day job and they're not an online influencer, what are they doing?
Right.
You know?
Right. Right, exactly. I mean, I think it's, the thing that here's what it reminded me of, and I'm going to go back to the sleep thing a little bit. My favorite book that I read in 2018 was this book called Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. He's a UC Berkeley sleep researcher. Have you read this book?
Yes. And it's terrifying, by the way.
It's terrifying. But, one of the things he talks about in this book is that people who are, one of the interesting features of a sleep deprived person is they can't perceive their own sleep deprivation, right? Yes. So someone who slept 6 hours thinks they're functioning like someone who slept 9 hours, when really the person who slept 6 hours is functioning like they're drunk, but They can't perceive that, right? And I think the same thing is happening to us with social media, where we are really like honestly lying to ourselves about how much time we're actually spending on there. I think it's super easy to be like, I only spend 15 minutes a day on social media. And when really maybe we're spending 2 hours a day. And maybe if we sort of step back and look at like our life goals and who we want to be and how we want to prioritize our health or, whatever, it's like maybe that's not how we actually want to be spending our time. I also hear a lot of people say, I'm too busy to work out, or I'm too busy, I have so much work to do, I only can get 6 hours of sleep a night. I'm like, okay, so if you're social mediaing for 14 hours a week, like you could be getting 14 more hours of sleep per week, or 14 hours of exercise, or whatever it is, whatever it is that's actually productive towards your health versus time on social media. So, I think social media is a tool. There's definitely some fun parts of it. I'm certainly never going to be one to say like social media is all bad and people should turn it off, but it definitely is a tool. And I think everybody should take advantage of all these new features that allow you to see what the reality is of your social media use.
Yeah, I think it's a lot like nutrition. It's just people don't know what they don't know. It's like, wait, what is leaky gut? What is that? I've never heard of that. You start talking about those things and it impacts all aspects of your health. That's what Why We Sleep was so good about that entire book of just, everything from like glucose sensitivity, insulin resistance, risk of injury. You run in a CrossFit gym. I'm sure you don't want people sleeping 4.5 hours and then trying to set a 1 rep max on deadlift the next morning. You don't want that. That's very dangerous,
Right.
It impacts everything. It's just like nutrition, but we've been operating oblivious to this information.
Yeah.
That's really the danger,
Yeah. No, so I am like an evangelist about sleep too. So, I will, if I get too busy, sometimes my workouts suffer a little bit, and occasionally, depending on what's going on in my life, my nutrition will suffer. But like, if I were to choose one of the three to like protect at all costs, it's sleep,
Yeah.
Like I am definitely pretty aggro about sleeping. So
I'm
not surprised that we share that in common.
Yeah, we share that big time. It's really funny. I sleep in a cave, man. When you're in it, like you can't tell the difference between night and day in my room. And it's like the only thing that room is for is sleep. It's a sleep sanctuary. Like I'm a Jedi,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, we like, travel. If we travel, we like take our sleep masks and earplugs and,
Yes.
we're just, Kelly, sometimes it goes crazy in hotel rooms too, like taping up all the lights. Like there'll be a little light on the TV and a little light on here and a light up on the fire thing. And he's like, going crazy trying to get rid of all the light. Cause once you get used to sleeping in a dark sanctuary,
Yeah.
you realize how much all that little light actually affects you.
Yeah, well, him and I are literally twins. There's a company called True Dark, and I actually have these sheets of circular stickers, and they're for that reason, like taping the smoke alarm, or taping up your cell phone charger, anything that emits a little LED. Yeah, that's so funny. I'm just crazy.
Okay, I am writing while you ask me the next question. I'm writing True Dark down because
True Dark. Yes,
I'm putting those for Kelly. I'm getting those for Kelly for Christmas.
Yep, and I have their blue blocker glasses. I have their Daywalker yellow blue blocker glasses. I have the nighttime ones, which are really red and absurd looking, like you would not wear them in public. But it's so much more than these average blue blocker glasses. Like they trick your brain into thinking it's pitch black. You can still kind of see. It's really interesting.
Oh, that's cool. Okay, I'm checking that out. Thank you, Justin.
Yes. So I'm trying to think of what to chat about next, because I do want to touch on this because it's important. I know we have a lot to get to. Well, I have a lot to dig out of your brain is actually what's happening in the most selfish way possible. But I do want to touch on just kind of a day in the life of Juliet, because what's interesting is we haven't chatted too much recently, but since I started doing like these videos and the podcasts and my live AMAs and all this stuff, just organically, now 85% of my audience is women. So I really just love getting, advice from someone in your situation where you are irrefutably a high performer. Like that's just what it is. So I really want to talk about kind of a day in the life and what that looks like and how you're able, to win world-class titles 20 years apart. Like how the hell does that happen? Like what does your day look like?
Sure. I will, and I don't want to go back to the social media thing, but I actually have been thinking about putting on this campaign about how like mundane my day-to-day life is, because a couple of people have said, oh, I see you on social media. Your life is so glamorous. I was like, okay, let me tell you how most of my days actually are.
Yeah.
So an average day for me is I usually wake up around 6 or 6:15. And a lot of entrepreneurs and life hack people are against this, but I actually spend about 30 minutes on my email, like right out of the gate. So I drink a little coffee. I spend about 30 minutes on my email just as my kids are starting to wake up. And the house is starting to kind of get going. But for me, I like it because I have to then like step away from my working to make lunches and get people ready for school. And we run this thing called the walking school bus at my daughter's elementary school, where we meet a bunch of people on the corner and we all walk to school with the kids.
Whoa.
And it's a super cool thing, by the way. And I recommend anyone start one of these things in their communities. As you and I both know, the situation in kids' health is pretty grim these days. And one of the reasons we started StandUp Kids is that kids don't move enough. But I also read a few years ago that even though kids today, by and large, still live within 2 miles of their elementary school, like 90% of kids are driven to school. And versus the 70s and 80s when I grew up, where like we all walked to school. I think it was like completely reversed statistically, where like every kid walked to school and 10% of the kids got a ride to school. It was just there's been this cultural shift. I think part of it is, fear, that your kid is going to get kidnapped, or, who knows what it is. There's a variety of factors, but people are afraid to let their kids walk to school on their own. So we realize that if we're just, if there's a parent or a group of parents at a designated location every single day, rain or shine, parents can either walk and drop their kid off there or drive and drop their kid off. And then we shepherd the kids the 1.5 miles to school.
Right.
And it's great for kids because their brains, they have a chance to move their bodies before school. Their brains are probably more turned on. It's fun to be outside. It's social. You're not stuck sitting in a car. There's like 1,000 benefits, but we leave at about 7:45, walk our kid to school, get back at about 8:15. And so I'm kind of out of pocket, like, doing kids stuff from about 7 to 8:15 every morning, which is part of the reason why I really value that like first thing in the morning email
Sure.
situation, because I sort of clean out all my spam and junky email. I respond to anything that's come in overnight that I've missed that's like mission critical so that people can start their day. We also work with a couple of companies internationally. So for me at 6:30 in the morning, it's like 3 or 4 in their day. So I want to try to communicate with them quickly before they leave for the day.
Right.
So that little morning email time is pretty critical. And then I actually feel like I can sort of relax, get my kids ready for school, walk to school without being like, I'm missing important things. And then I usually come home and try to get myself ready, make some kind of healthy breakfast, pack a healthy lunch. And then on some days of the week, we go to San Francisco CrossFit. Other days of the week, we go to our MobilityWOD office.
Mm-hmm.
And then most days of the week, I actually try to work out. If I go to San Francisco CrossFit, I actually eat a little breakfast and I actually get to the gym at about 9 and I try to do a workout right then.
Yeah.
And I'm with you. I think, there's certainly people who think that afternoon workouts are better. And I do occasionally work out in the afternoon if my schedule doesn't allow for me to do a morning workout. But I have found that given how many people need to talk to me and how many things I need to accomplish in a day, if I just sort of like walk in the door and do my workout,
Mm-hmm.
I'm set. And I will say that I 100% appreciate the massive flexibility I have as a business owner and also someone who owns a gym.
True.
Not everybody can do a workout at 9 o'clock in the morning. And
Right.
I actually used to feel guilty about it, thinking, well, I shouldn't, like, this is my regular work day. I shouldn't be working out like during business hours. It sort of looks bad. And a few years ago, I totally got over that because I realized that like for my own health and like mental and physical health, that I function actually way better when I'm training and training hard and often. And also, I'm running health and fitness companies. So
Yes.
it's actually like part of what I do is I need to like live what I preach, right? So if I just don't ever exercise, then so anyway, I used to sort of feel weird that I worked out like during the workday, but I'm pretty efficient. I usually work out from 9 to 10. And that's not every day, by the way. That's probably 3 weekdays a week.
Yeah.
And then I either am literally working at San Francisco CrossFit or MobilityWOD. Most of it is done on my computer. I take a ton of calls and meetings because between MobilityWOD and San Francisco CrossFit, we have about 40 employees and then another like 15 contractors, some of whom are abroad. So there's just a lot of people to manage and people to talk to. So I do end up doing a lot of talking to people all day long.
Mm-hmm.
And I usually work until about 4 or 5. And then I go back into like mom mode where I'm driving kids to water polo practice and ceramics classes and, dropping stuff off at school. And then I like to cook. So I actually cook an actual dinner most nights and we sit down at the table because that's something we really value as a family as well. So we actually sit together, usually sometime between 6 or 7. I try not to, but if I have to get back on my computer and work for an hour, sometimes at night, I do that if I have to catch up on work or if there's things I haven't finished or feel panicked about. And then I'm usually in bed by like 9 or 9:30. So that's kind
beautiful.
of a day.
Yeah.
It's funny because, Kelly and I do get to do a lot of cool things and we definitely are like adventurous and sort of live life to the fullest, right? Like we like to do things, but my day-to-day life is very like pedestrian. I'm literally like taking care of my kids and in front of my computer for most of every day.
Yeah, it's so funny. I mean, our days parallel so closely. It's insane. And for me too, like I built a CrossFit powerlifting gym in my garage. Like I got a sauna in there, everything. So it's like really some people may see me. Yeah. Every couple of months I may be in like Puerto Rico or something. And that seems glamorous, but the day to day is like, I am just a straight up hermit and I'm in bed at 9:45 PM. And like, I don't care. I'm like, I like it that way, and that's how you're uber productive.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've just found that the more I protect my sleep and the more I protect my exercise and eat well, the more efficient and high functioning I can be at my work.
That's
So,
exactly it.
So I think, once you make that connection, it's like you can't go back,
Right. Right. Yeah. Once you're optimized, being, I don't know, I guess the word would be unoptimized is just it's not an option at all.
Yeah.
But
The only thing Kelly and I lament is that sometimes we think we've become too fragile. And one way I'll say that is that, now, if I get like 7 hours of sleep or 6 hours of sleep if I'm traveling or something comes up, I feel like I got 2 hours of sleep. Like
yeah.
I definitely, anyway, so that, I don't want to ever go back to feeling like, being able to feel like I'm functioning at 6 hours of sleep, but I definitely notice when I do not sleep,
right,
that I am not my best self.
Well, what's weird too is that like I had this conversation with a buddy of mine from back in small town Rhode Island where I grew up, and he's just like, man, I smoke cigarettes and I drink every day. I feel like $1 million every morning. And I'm like, wait a minute. Like, you have to understand that on your scale of 1 to 10, like your 10 is my 2. So then like, you don't actually know what my 10 feels like. You know what I mean? People
Right.
they get used to their normal. And I think that you're
Right.
you're normal now, which is optimized,
Yeah. I know people like that too. I definitely know people who, where I live, people drink a lot. It's like a thing, and I think maybe you're right. I notice a lot of people who I think don't even know they feel terrible because feeling terrible is their normal, right?
Yep.
And so maybe you wake up every day because you have a hangover because you drank half a bottle of wine or a bottle of wine the night before, and you do that every single night.
Yes.
You don't realize that you feel shitty because that's how you feel every day.
I freaked out. I ranted on this video recently. It was like, I think it was like the day before Thanksgiving or something. I was doing a live video, and I was like, there's nothing crazier to me than when like a 300-pound person is like, what do you mean I can't eat gluten? Like, I've never had a problem before. And I'm like, why are you talking? If you've never had a problem, what do you mean you've never had a problem? This is why you're talking to me. There's an active problem, but it's amazing what the body adapts to and gets used to.
Right. Well, and I think what the brain, like what we can tell ourselves, and I also think, we're in this very challenging time with health because, nutrition is so complicated maybe not for you and I, like maybe it seems very straightforward, but I think there is so much information people are bombarded with, should I be low carb? Should I be low fat? Should I not eat gluten? Should I eat gluten? Should I do this? Should I eat fermented foods? Like, I think the average person really does feel sort of overwhelmed, like people want to do the right thing.
Yeah.
And then nutrition science hasn't really caught up with all the, there's just not great science because it's really it's really hard to conduct really good nutrition studies. So that's a problem. And then I think another issue we have is that we've sort of normalized overweightness and obesity. Now, Don't get me wrong. I also do not believe in shaming anybody. I think, especially as a woman, I believe that many different body types need to be acceptable. And, everybody does not need to be skinny, as skinny is understood. I'm certainly not skinny. But, and I do think overweightness and obesity is a complex phenomenon. It's not just what people eat, it's marketing, it's advertising, it's cultural issue. There's a whole host of reasons why we have this problem, but I also think we've normalized it to the point where, well, everybody else looks like me. Yes. And we're all 65 pounds overweight, but everybody looks like me. So it's become normal and it's no longer a problem, and sort of no big deal. If I get diabetes, I can just take these pills and
take some metformin.
And it was interesting because my next door neighbor came over, and it was kind of refreshing because she's a diabetic, and she's not super overweight but a little bit overweight, and she said, man, not enough people talk about how shitty you feel when you're diabetic.
Yeah.
And she's like, I don't think people realize. They think, oh, I'm going to, become a diabetic and go to the doctor and get the medication I need and I'll be perfectly fine. And she's like, I feel like shit all the time.
Yeah.
So I think that's another thing, nobody's really talking about is like how you feel.
Of course. Yeah. What's your quality of life?
Right. So,
yeah. So obviously, like, one of the number one reasons why we're doing this show is it's only getting worse for kids as well. It's starting so young. Like that school bus thing's amazing. I need to like scream that from the mountaintops to people. That's so cool. But so I live here I'm in Nashville, Tennessee, just outside of Nashville. And Tennessee is the worst state in the country right now. The childhood obesity rate is 37.7%, which is just, it's staggering, which is why I love your work so much. And so to go back to how this started, actually, so I first heard of StandUp Kids, probably like many people, through Tim Ferriss, who is one of your besties and my ultimate fanboy mentor of all time. So I'm very jealous of you. But yeah, I mean, literally just when I first heard of StandUp Kids, I remember like rushing over to the laptop. I'm like, wait, what? Like standupkids.org? What is this thing? Like, and I was just blown away by it. So I want to tell people all about it. And that's like the main focus I want to get into now. But first and foremost, I want to just talk about this because I do mostly nutrition for adults. So I want to start this conversation by saying that these dangers are for kids for sure, but we all went through them. I sat my entire childhood in these terrible desks and all these things. So I think it'd be really powerful to start with the overall dangers of desk-bound work for adults as well, because I need to tell everybody listening that, and I don't know if I told you this when we met or whatever, but Deskbound, your book was a straight up game changer for me. By that, I mean, I have a standing working station in my house that I use all day. It's got a big giant pole with a screen. So my neck is neutral spine. I mean, I've done like under desk ellipticals. Deskbound literally re-taught me how to walk. Like I relearned how to walk. It's an unbelievable book. So thank you first and foremost.
Thank you.
Yeah. So can you dive into, so what was it that made you write Deskbound? What you're just like, I have to do this.
Yeah. So it actually started way back in 2010. Kelly did a talk at Google that he entitled Deskbound. And, you know, we never sort of thought that this would be a path that our sort of health and fitness careers would take. I'll start by saying, but what we started seeing, because we've always had a gym and our gym has always had an in-house physical therapy clinic, is that we started seeing people coming in with injuries, aches, pains, and we realized that a lot of those were caused by just the sheer amount of sitting people were doing.
Right.
Like, let me give you an example. You know, we'd have a recreational runner, you know, someone who likes to get up before work and run and then maybe do the occasional half marathon, come in and like dumbfounded that they tore their Achilles on like their random morning run. Like they're so confused. They're like, I don't understand. You know, I eat well and I train and I've always been athletic. And like, I'm just dumbfounded that I tore my Achilles. And Kelly's like, well, tell me a little bit more about your lifestyle. Well, of course, this person, you know, would get up and run from 5:30 to 6:30 every day, get in their car, drive an hour to work, then get to work and then sit at work for 10 to 12 hours and then get in the car, drive home, sit down to dinner with their family and then watch Game of Thrones for 2 hours.
Yep.
So, I mean, we're talking about someone who considers themselves an athlete and yet is sitting with their body in like all 90-degree angles for 16 hours of the day, and then actually is confused when they, tear an ACL or have some kind of injury, right? And so we started seeing, or we saw a ton of people with like these neck injuries, right? Coming in and like these chronic, neck injuries, or you name it. I mean, body injuries of all types. And when we would start to question people, we realized, oh crap, like without exception, these people are sitting 16 hours a day. Yeah. So this was way back in 2010. Standing desks were not even a thing at this point. They really weren't commercially available. You could find like 2 on the market at that point, but they were like $7,000.
Yeah.
So they were not really available for like normal people. But Kelly went down to Google and gave this talk and just said, hey, look, like we need to actually start looking at the sitting load. I also saw this amazing graph that has stuck with me. And if I can help sort of describe it for your listeners at one point, people really started joining gyms in droves in like the 80s. And if you think about it, like on a chart, that number has steadily increased over time. Right. But interestingly, the obesity rate has followed it exactly.
Sure.
So people are trying to do the right, what that tells me is people are trying to do the right thing. We've done a good job of getting out the message that people need to exercise. Mm-hmm. but our obesity rates are just tracking that equally, meaning turns out that going to the gym and doing an hour workout a day is not enough to combat the sitting for 16 hours a day and also eating like crap.
Right.
So we just originally started talking about it really focused on adults, just saying, hey, look, like, if you want to, if you want to be a recreational athlete and do a triathlon on the weekend, and really not get injured, like you can't train for your triathlon from 5:30 to 7 in the morning and then go sick for 16 hours and then wonder why you have weird injuries. Like you can't do that. You gotta like make the connection for yourself. So this was just sort of an early discussion we had. And it wasn't until 2013, we were volunteering at our daughter Georgia's field day. We still do like a traditional field day with like sack races and tug of war. And I don't know if you did that when you were a kid, but we still do that. And we were volunteering at the sack races, and Kelly and I were astounded by how poorly the kids moved. I mean, and let me explain this to you. Like most of the kids actually had trouble like lifting their knee to their chest so that they could hook the sack on and actually get into the sack. And then once they were in the sack, they sort of couldn't really jump, like they couldn't do it. And then we started seeing all these weird, like physical issues with kids. Like they just did not have a physical literacy and a physical literacy that we had as kids, like every kid in my elementary school could easily get into the sack and like haul ass across the field and jump really well. So we just started seeing some weird things. And then we started talking at home and thought like, wait a second, we've now for 3 years, it's 2013 at this point, been telling every adult we know, especially every adult recreational athlete we know, like, hey, if you want to perform well at your recreational sport, whether it's CrossFit or triathlons or whatever it is, like you can't train and then sit all day. You need to start standing at work. Like this was the thing we were telling everybody. So that's what motivated us to start StandUp Kids. We started really small. We just paid for and flipped a single classroom at our daughter's 4th grade class. The other 4th grade teachers were like, what is this? We want those. So we flipped another group of desks. And then a year after that, we flipped the entire school. And then it's just been slowly growing over time. And we're just a small little organization that's chugging away. We're not going anywhere. And we estimate we've flipped about 100,000 desks nationwide.
Wow.
Many of those in low-income schools. And, we're just slowly working on it. Our new sort of focus with the organization is actually to try to do more research. There's been quite a bit of research done on kids and standing desks, all of which is positive for standing desks. Although we believe that our mission is going to go nuclear when we can get legislative changes, meaning that if there is infrastructure improvement dollars or new schools built, that it's just an automatic that standing desks are put in to schools, or at least half standing desks, half sitting desks, just something. So, but in order for that to happen, we need to have more research done in more places. So we're actually really focusing our attention now on, we're actually working with UC Berkeley and potentially the Mayo Clinic to try to put together like a 2-year really comprehensive study at a couple of schools here in the Bay Area, where we're going to track some educational metrics like test scores, cognition, all of which, by the way, has been researched, but we just need more of it. Test scores, cognition, general sort of focus and attention in learning. And then we're also going to track BMI over time and some other physical metrics like, how much dorsiflexion do the kids have in their ankles if they're sitting all the time versus standing, some sort of like general sort of physical health metrics. But we also, as a result of all this, we wrote, I think it came out in 2015, we wrote the book Deskbound, in part because standing desks by 2015 were starting to kind of blow up onto the scene, like they were becoming hip. But what we saw was that people were not succeeding in their switch from sitting to standing. They either didn't know why they should do it, or they were doing it but not succeeding because they were like running out and buying their standing desk and then like, standing there for 9 hours on their first day and then like super bummed because their feet hurt and their low back was sore at the end of the day. And then like turning their desk back down to sitting and never standing again. So we realized that that like some education needed to happen around this whole standing desk phenomenon. We liken switching to a standing desk to running a marathon. So
Yeah.
if you, Justin, were going to run a marathon, you would like go online and find a cool marathon training program, and you would, start it 3 months before your marathon and follow it meticulously. And then you'd like run a marathon, right? You'd actually be ready. Well, we think switching from sitting to standing, especially if you've been sitting for some years of your life, it's kind of like running a marathon, and that you kind of need to put yourself on like a shaping gradient and train for it.
Yes.
Now, there are certainly people who can just go cold turkey, drop their sitting desk, switch to standing, they're fine. But for most people, you need to put yourself on a shaping gradient where like you start with 30 minutes on your first day and you just stand for 30 minutes and then sit. And then maybe the next day you go up to 45 minutes. And, and it's, the other thing we really try to emphasize in Deskbound is how you set up your standing desk is everything, right? Like if it's too low or if it's too high, or if you don't have a place to put your foot, like there's a lot of pitfalls you can have with like poor standing desk setup. So really our mission with Deskbound was sort of to say, hey, you've probably now heard of standing desks, in the media. This is why they're important, and this is how to be successful in switching to a standing desk. And we also give a lot of strategies, because not everybody can switch to a standing desk. We give a lot of strategies for people who have no choice but to sit, sort of how to like buffer that sitting.
Right.
And, one of the things we did in the book was sort of help people categorize their life into two parts. You are either, doing optional or non-optional sitting, right? So flying on a plane obviously is non-optional sitting. Like you have to sit on a plane. There's no choice there. But, if you're taking the bus to work, you may as well stand. Yeah. Or if you're at your office, you may as well stand. I'm kind of a traditionalist. So like we don't stand at the dinner table. We actually sit. There's ways, but I think if you sort of look at your day and think, where can I add in some standing or moving? And I think the real key with standing desks, and this is for kids and adults alike, is the goal of standing desks is not to stand. The goal of standing desks is to create an environment where you can constantly be moving around. Yes. Because it's true. You can go on the internet and find an article on Vox or wherever else that says standing is bad for you. And it's true. If you stand for 9 hours like a statue, it's actually not good for you.
For sure.
But if you are in a standing desk environment where you've created a place where you can put your foot up on this and put your foot up on that and constantly be changing positions and moving and, always, like if you need to take a little break, you can perch on your stool. I mean, the goal is to just be, switching positions constantly throughout your day. And the reason we like the standing desk is it creates an environment where it's easy to always be fidgeting and moving and changing positions. Once you sit down, you just kind of adopt that like shrimp back position, and maybe you move your chair around a little bit side to side, but you can't really move in a meaningful way. So,
yeah, that's been huge. I'm a total nerd and I follow everything meticulously, but so with Deskbound in particular, I set that I have a stand-up station. So I did everything you said to do. Like I have an adjustable stool that I can change the height of it, and it's like just under my butt cheek, so I can kind of lean back on it. I have a smaller stool in front of me. I can put one knee up on it. I can put my feet up on it. The fidget bars that you do are great too. But what I really want to just talk to people about is it's like we talk about with nutrition. You kind of have to go back to basics. And that curve of, okay, more people going to the gym, more people getting obese. People do what you tell them to do, because the same thing with the food pyramid. Once the food pyramid was adopted, everybody started eating less fat and all these things. And the obesity thing just continued to get worse and worse and worse. But there's so much to undo. And the reason why I want to get people to focus on it with kids is, so a story of myself, right? Like I'm a professional musician. For the last 15 years, I've been playing gigs. And I got this gig on an island. So I lived on an island, all expenses paid, for 5 weeks. And I took with me a kettlebell and becoming a supple leopard. And I played piano for 5 hours a day, sitting down on the beach. And then in the evenings, I went through these supple leopard moves and mobility with this kettlebell, because I had ankles just made of stone. Like when I first got into the powerlifting, CrossFit scene or whatever, and you think about these little kids, there's all these memes online right now, like a little baby in a diaper picks up a ball and has perfect squat form. Right. Until we break that child's mobility by saying, sit in this desk, shut your mouth, learn some stuff, or you get in trouble. Right.
Yes. Well, let me give you a few sad statistics that I just learned. And we actually just published our latest season of our own podcast called The Ready State, and it's all about kids' health.
Oh, great.
So there's 8 or 9 episodes literally all about kids' health, but we interviewed a childhood obesity expert named Dr. Jose Greenspan, who told us some very disturbing information. The first is that kids ages 2 to 19 today, that 60% of them are predicted to be obese by the time they're age 35.
Wow.
So, I mean, and by the way, that is irrespective of socioeconomic class or race or whatever. So, you know, any listener who thinks, ooh, that's not going to be my kid, like it's not. And also how your kid looks today has nothing to do with whether or not they're going to be obese when they're 35, right?
Right.
A lot of kids can, because of metabolism and genetics, a lot of kids can buffer a really bad diet when they're little and be skinny. But that always catches up with people.
Yes.
So I think, you know, and by the way, that's 60% of kids being obese, which means another percentage of them will also be overweight.
Oh, yeah.
And we don't have any projected data on that. But I mean, we're looking at like potentially 80% of kids today being overweight or obese by the time they're age 35. Like that's a sad statistic. The other one that really blew my mind was that when I was a kid in the 70s, I had a 1 in 4,000 chance of getting type 2 diabetes. And kids today also, irrespective of race or class, have a 1 in 4 chance of getting type 2 diabetes.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, we are not doing a good job.
No.
We have a lot of work to do. And, you know, if this is going to become a gigantic public health crisis and I mean, in addition to just how shitty everybody's going to feel physically, it's going to be a huge draw on our economy in terms of healthcare costs. And, you know, I would go toe to toe with anyone who says, you know, that like, I believe climate change will also be a big part of our future, but like, I'll go toe to toe with anyone and say like, I think this kids' health issue is also equal. It's going to be a huge deal in another like 20 to 30 years, way bigger than it even is now.
You are 100% correct.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with Chris Kresser?
Oh yeah.
So in Unconventional Medicine, he talks about this, and I try to get people to wrap their brains around this because I'm constantly saying, listen, I do not give a shit what you look like naked. I don't care at all. That's not why I do nutrition, right?
No.
So Chris has this statistic in Unconventional Medicine where he says we are 12 years away. Now, this is for everyone, adults included, 12 years away from 100% of America's GDP being spent caring for metabolic diseases.
Right.
100%. I mean, that's economic collapse because of metabolic disease that is 100% preventable.
Right.
It's insanity.
I mean, it is total insanity. And so, you know, here's what I think about standing desks and kids. Like, do I think it is a 100% cure-all for the like potential ills of our kids' health? No, but I definitely think it has to be part of the solution, right? Like,
yes,
we clearly need to figure out how to get rid of the standard American diet. Like that's not working for people. So like, yes, that is a thing. We clearly need people to exercise more in terms of formal exercise, but we also need to create places where people can just move more and get what's called non-exercise activity throughout their day. And that's really what people are missing, right? Like a lot of people are doing a pretty good job and plenty of kids do their 1 hour of sports practice or whatever they do, but that's not enough. You know, PE is mostly gone in schools. So what I hope at least people take away from this is like, you know, yes, you need to exercise. Yes, you need to watch what you need, but you also have to be honest with yourself about how much non-exercise activity you're getting in a day. And really, like, as human beings, we're supposed to be getting a ton of non-exercise activity. We're supposed to be walking and moving and changing positions and squatting up and down off the floor. And, you know, just, it's all these little micro movements throughout the day that actually you burn a significant number of additional calories, if that's motivating to people. And also it's just healthier for your tissues in your body because you're supposed to be constantly moving, and, you know, your joints need to move throughout their full range of motion in every given day. But also it's just like one piece of this puzzle for everybody's overall health. So, and the other reason I love the kids standing desk so much is its total elegance and simplicity. And let me tell you what I mean by that. There are tons of amazing people out there doing work to try to get kids to exercise and move more. And I commend those people because I think we need all that. But let's just say I, at my elementary school, want to start, like, let's say a before school exercise program because we don't have PE. Mm-hmm. So that requires a coach or a parent volunteer or a live human to actually come every single day to plan and run a program. Usually it's done for free because there's not a budget for this, right? So it's like a nonprofit or pro bono kind of thing that's being done, but it requires like a constant human intervention. Right. The standing desk, by contrast, is so elegant because it's literally just changing the physical environment. Kids and teachers immediately get it and understand and adapt to it. Very little training and education is required for kids, very little for kids, a little bit more for teachers, but barely anymore. And these desks last for 20 years. So here we're talking about an intervention that is like a one-time expense that lasts for 20 years, that requires almost no human interaction or intervention. It's pretty intuitive for kids. It's pretty intuitive for teachers. So that's why I like it so much, right? Like, there are definitely many ways to come at this problem. And so I'm not saying our way is the only way, but one of the reasons I'm such a fan of it is just the elegance. You know, we can go send 50 standing desks to a school and they tell them, like, hey, if you have any questions, let us know. And they don't ever call us with questions because guess what? It's intuitive for kids to stand and move all day long, and it makes sense to teachers. And it's just a simple intervention. So that's one of the reasons why I like it so much.
Well, and I think it's a stepping stone as well. One, it's vitally important. Two, you just gave me more hope than you know in this episode because you talked about legislation. So I had a conversation with Rob Wolf just last week for a future podcast episode. And I was talking about the school lunch program. And I know you have nutrition certifications as well. You understand the standard American diet thing. The same organization that runs the school programs runs the prison food programs. And it's this deeply entrenched, corrupt situation. So Rob and I are both of this understanding that it's next to impossible to change the legislation for school lunches. But you actually just said that there seems to have been some headway there. Do you have any insight into this, the legislative end, or have you learned anything about school lunch programs through doing your work, or what have you seen?
Well, I mean, I definitely follow school lunch programs, and I watched very closely Jamie Oliver's heroic efforts to try to get the school lunch programs changed. I think there is a lot of complexity there because there's this gigantic food lobby that wants to basically offload their cheap food to the U.S. government to be used for school lunches. So that's sort of one part of the piece of the puzzle. I think there's also resistance to changing the standard American diet. I don't want to get political, but our current government is even rolling back some of the things Michelle Obama did with her Let's Move campaign to try to make positive changes to the school lunch program. Like, I think they've now, under our current administration, recategorized ketchup as a vegetable when, like, Michelle Obama at least got ketchup uncategorized as a vegetable. So,
right.
So I think, unfortunately, and again, not to get political here, but we're definitely, I think the Obama administration, or Michelle Obama and her Let's Move campaign, at least was trying to make some slight little headway towards.
It was an attempt, yes.
It was an attempt. It was not a fully successful attempt. And I think, unfortunately, we're rolling that back. We're kind of going backwards in time a little bit there. So I think there's a lot of work to be done. You know, I think what's also interesting, and I talked to our principal about this recently, and she's the one who was sort of our first champion of standing desks. So I am, like, such a fan of her. But, you know, she said one of the issues is that we're never going to be able to change the school lunch program. We're never going to be able to change sort of school food until there's a bigger cultural change, until people start valuing it. And, you know, I see as a parent that, you know, when I'm sort of operating in my professional world and hanging out with people like you and Rob Wolf and all these people who are sort of doing what I'm doing, I feel like what I'm doing is, like, normal. But once I go to like a PTA meeting at my kid's school, and I realize that my approach to food for myself and with my family, like, I am still a freak.
Oh, yeah.
freak. Like
we are the weirdos of the world.
Yes, I am the weirdo. Like I'm the one who people think they're weird because I want my kids to like eat vegetables 3 times a day. And that, I like sort of die on the inside when I hear parents at my school. This is my latest obsession, but when I hear parents at my school talking about how it's okay to sell Izzy's at school instead of 7-Up because Izzy's are sweetened with fruit juice versus high fructose corn syrup. And I literally like fall out of my chair and die because I'm like, okay, do I want to, be that person again in the meeting who tries to say, actually, that's not true. Like once it passes your face, your body doesn't know whether it's fruit juice, whatever. So, what I see is that, I honestly am not sure until, the food perception is changed on the home front that we're gonna have institutional change. It's like, as long as it's okay for parents to like send Doritos to school and soda, and that our standard American diet is sort of perceived as okay. I honestly, and I sound very skeptical, but I'm not sure we can change the school lunch program until there's wholesale changes in the home.
I'm with you.
In the standard American diet.
Well, I was full of, when I first started Clovis Kids, I do this program where I work with families and transform the whole household. And I was just full of piss and vinegar. I'm like, I'm about to change the whole world. I'm going to change the lunch programs. I'm changing everything. And then I'm like at my nephew Jackson's game. And every time he plays a baseball game, there's one mom is responsible for bringing the after snacks. And it's a different mom every time. And it's everything from gummy bears to sour worms to brownies to Doritos and Cheetos and Mountain Dew and, Capri Sun's healthy. It's made of fruit. Right? I can't have the fructose debate with one more person without somebody getting rear naked choked. I can't. I
know. I mean, we're the same person, Justin, because and in fact, we talk about this very thing on our podcast episode because it tweaks me out so much. And that is the nutrition pre, post, during kids' games, tournaments. I mean, you name it. Like my daughter's been playing volleyball for years, and we go to these tournaments, and we create this because Kelly and I are on the team. We create this sort of training table for our kids' team that is, we even allow more things to be on it than we'd like so that we aren't like total freaks. But you walk around these venues, and I mean, here are like 12-year-old kids playing a all-day volleyball tournament, and their training table is covered with like bagels, Costco-sized bags of Doritos, and Capri Suns. And I'm like, wow, like this is what, or my favorite was, I seriously, like my head blew off because when my daughter was 5 and playing soccer, it was like my day to bring the snacks for after, which I, by the way, don't even think they need a snack. They don't need a snack for a 1-hour soccer game. So let's start there. But let's just say I'm following along, trying to like be the mom who goes along with everything. I bring what I think is like the most reasonable snack. In fact, I bring more than I think they need. I bring sliced oranges, string cheese, and some like gluten-free pretzels for the kids. Well, even though she wasn't signed up to bring it, another mom on the team brought donuts.
Oh, good Lord.
So not only did none of the kids eat what I brought, because of course they're kids, they should, what kid wouldn't want a donut over a string cheese and some pretzels? And then I was also left with the dilemma of then having to let my own kid eat a donut because you're stuck in this thing where you're like, I don't want my kid to be the other, the outsider, the freak, but it's the worst position because you don't want to let your kid eat the donut because you don't want them to have some kind of like deprivation complex where then they're like hiding and hoarding food because you're so strict with them. Right. So it's always this balance as a parent where it's like when your views about food and eating are so outside the norm, you risk creating weird food behaviors in your kid, like hiding and like trying to like eat 12 bowls of Captain Crunch at their friend's house because they can't eat it at their house, right? So you have to try to find this balance, but it slays me. It slays me. That donut thing, like I will never forget it. Like seriously, if like you could have had like a black light on me, like steam was coming out of my ears.
Well, and the other piece of this that I'm glad you just touched on is it's a camaraderie thing as well. So it's part of being a team. So I talked to my brother about this because it's my brother's son, Jackson. He's 6 now. And I just helped my brother lose 40 pounds with zero fitness. He doesn't have time to work out. We cleaned up the diet. He lost 40 pounds. So I'm talking to him about this, like, and he's like, Justin, what do I do? Do I go up to Jackson and say, hey, you're the only kid on the entire team that can't have the gummy worms? Tough little kid. He's like, he's going to cry. He's going to start crying, you know? And so it's like you're right. It's the worst possible spot to be in.
Right. You're in a lose-lose position because you either let your kid eat the donut, which you don't want him to eat, which is usually how that's always the side I've fallen on because I want him to feel part of the team and I don't want him to feel deprived, but I'm dying on the inside letting him eat a donut. Or you exclude them from eating a donut and they cry and they're bummed and they feel left out and they think their parents are freaks and then they try to hoard donuts when they can because they don't ever get them, right? Yeah. So, I mean, you really are put in a terrible position. I thought my friend Nick Gill, he's on our podcast. I feel like he said it the best. You know, he's the strength and conditioning coach for the All Blacks, which for those your listeners who don't know is like a very famous winning rugby team out of New Zealand. They're very famous. And you know, and rugby is popular like everywhere besides the US. Mm-hmm. So huge followings in Europe and wherever, and people all know who the All Blacks are. But I you know, he is a strength and conditioning coach for this really big professional team and also a father of 2 kids. And I said, hey, like, what do the All Blacks eat? Like on a game, you know, on the day they have a game, which, you know, these games last 2 hours and they're really intense and there's much more running and physical contact than American football. So, you know, it's more like a soccer game in terms of output than it is like a football game. It's like a soccer game with physical contact, right? Sure. So it's a lot of output. And I said, well, like, what do your athletes eat? And he's like, well, he said, the biggest thing is they, you know, eat like 3 healthy meals, a breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And then maybe, you know, before their game, they'll have like an orange. And then they'll play their game and they'll definitely have some water. And maybe they'll even have some water with an electrolyte during their game. Yeah. And then, you know, if the game ends at 4 or 5, they'll just go home and have a healthy dinner. Or, you know, maybe they'll have like a scoop of protein powder right after the game and then go home and have a healthy dinner. But it was crazy because I'm like, okay, these are like serious, legitimate professional athletes who are just basically eating 3 healthy meals and then adding in a few extra carbohydrates and a little protein powder in order to sort of survive like a 2-hour full-on professional rugby game. And I'm thinking like, so my 5-year-old needs like 600 calories of donuts and gummy worms to survive her soccer game? Like,
exactly.
Where are we?
And the pre and post nutrition in the CrossFit world. I would love to do a whole nother podcast with you and Kelly about the fueling for athletes. I don't know if you know this, but I do nutrition coaching for professional MMA fighters. These are people that train 4 to 6 hours a day, right? And they're like, when do you carb load your athletes? I'm like, I don't. And then you talk to average Joes that are like, they might do, you know, 3 45-minute CrossFit workouts a week or whatever. And I'm looking at them and looking at the sugar intake. And I'm like, you understand that you actually have never experienced glycogen depletion. You don't even know what that is. You read it somewhere and decided that you need to refuel your glycogen stores because of your 45-minute workout. It's staggering to me. Like, I can't wrap my brain around it.
Well, I think there's a real misperception too. It's like maybe in a regular single CrossFit workout, you burn like 300 calories.
Yeah,
like I think people think, I feel like because you feel like you're working so hard in a CrossFit workout, people think they're burning like 1,000 calories, but like really you're burning 300 calories, which is maybe like a cappuccino. Maybe you have like a cappuccino or something, right? Like in terms of like sort of the calorie in, calorie out thing, you know, and I have a challenging time because there's all these super hip nutrition programs, none of which I'll name because I always want businesses to be successful and don't ever want to like call out anyone. Sure. But I see a lot of these nutrition programs, a lot of them where, you know, they're doing before and afters on Instagram or whatever. People are getting super lean. But what I see too, this also slays me, is like, you know, I'll follow all these forums and they're like, how do I get my, you know, my last 30 grams of carbohydrates? And everyone's like, hot tamales, gummy bears, you know. And so here are these people who are like really working hard to try to be so cut and have all these abs. And I'm thinking like, is that where we are as like a health and fitness world where, you know, we've like swung the pendulum away from eating food and thinking that like we have to replace our glycogen by eating 100 hot tamales at the end of our day. Like, well,
so crazy. If I remove this is the name of a company, and I'm sorry to that company, but it's the mentality that you're talking about. It's the idea of if it fits your macros.
Right.
If it fits your macros, it doesn't matter if you're eating dirt from the flower bed in your front yard. Like, if it fits your macros, do it. That I cannot handle that. I just can't do it. And like, even with my athletes, like if they want that approach, I tell them to find somebody else. I'm not your guy, you know?
No.
So,
No.
but anyway, I know that I'm taking all of your time. I'm sorry. We've
No,
flown.
it's all good. It's so fun to talk to you. We're the same person, Justin. So it's no surprise that we could natter on all day long.
I know, right? It bums me out. Like I'm like, I need to be, we're geographically challenged. We don't get to hang out. It's a bummer.
I know, although I will tell you that I don't know when it's going to happen, but I've never been to Nashville, and it's actually on my list of places to go. So
Okay, well,
I may actually be in your neck of the woods one of these days.
I need to let you know that my family owns 2 Airbnbs downtown, and you can bring 24 guests, and we will put you.
Okay.
Done deal. All right.
Deal.
I would love to have you come. It'll be so much fun.
That would be so fun. Yeah, it's like high on my list of places to go. So
yeah, you'd love it. We'd have a great time. So I want to just on the kids side of things. One, before we wrap up, obviously I need to get my entire audience involved in what you're doing. So my questions with getting involved really come down to, what is the best way for parents to get involved with this? Is it the type thing where they maybe reach out to you first and get some advice? Or is there a script you can give? Like, this is how you approach a school administrator and say, hey, got this crazy idea. You know, what's the first step for these parents?
Well, I think the first step is to find a willing teacher or administrator. And we definitely we don't have a script on standupkids.org, but we have tons of information and data that can be sort of pulled into like a pretty coherent script. I think once educators start hearing some of the like facts and statistics about sort of the future of kids' health, as well as how standing desks can be part of the solution, it's pretty easy to put together scripts. So I think the first thing is finding either a teacher or administrator who they think might be willing to give this a go, right?
Okay.
Now, we are focusing most of our attention at StandUp Kids now on raising money to try to do research. And so we've temporarily suspended our grant program, which is giving desk grants directly to teachers. But there's a couple things that people can do. We have a super simple way on our website that people can set up a fundraiser for their own project. We have tons of parents who've done simple stuff like set up a Kickstarter and done bake sales and had a Kickstarter to raise money, because what we found is that if you can get one classroom converted at your kid's school, even if it's not your own kid's classroom, like that's an important thing, because a lot of people are like, oh, I like this idea. How do I get a standing desk for my kid? And I think the mentality needs to be a little bit more like, how do we get the most standing desks in front of the most people? Because the more we get, the more kids are then going to get them. So what we found is if you find a teacher at your kid's school who's willing to give it a go, and you either spend the money yourself or raise the money on Kickstarter or through StandUp Kids, the other teachers then start to see it. And they see that it is not weird. It is actually cool. It's an easy intervention. It's a simple switch from sitting to standing for kids, that kids don't die, that it helps with sort of classroom management and kid behavior. And a lot of kids are better able to focus and learn better. So I think it's like the one classroom approach. And even since we started StandUp Kids, when we first started StandUp Kids, flipping a single classroom with 25 desks was about $5,000. But as the furniture has improved and changed, and there's been more and more volume of standing desks sold, we've partnered with this company called Veridesk, for example, and they are a super cool company who now has a kids line of desks. You can flip an entire classroom of 25 desks for like $2,500.
Wow.
And so, it's a reasonable amount of money to raise in a community for a classroom that can literally change a whole, 25 desks. And then to me, that's the way to get it started, because even at our first, pilot school, there were some skeptical teachers. And it took them seeing the desks in other classrooms and hearing the experiences of the teachers to be like, oh, okay, this isn't weird. I could totally do this. I see it.
Right.
So really it's about like sort of familiarizing yourself with some of the facts and statistics about why standing desks are good for kids in an educational environment, finding a teacher or administrator and just like giving it a go. I have to say that when I first approached our principal about this, I thought that I was going to have to give her like a Supreme Court argument of like, why standing desks for kids? And what I've learned is actually that teachers and administrators, many of whom now at this point have heard about standing desks, there's also this movement towards flexible furniture in classrooms, because I think teachers are realizing that, you know, this sort of 1950s approach of like, let's make industrial workers isn't always working for every kid. So we'll start with like, it's not so weird to hear for teachers and administrators anymore. Also, they're all actually seeking for ways to sort of manage their classrooms, because the reality is teachers and administrators are the ones on the ground with kids who've been sent to school with too much sugar, with too much screen time, having sat too much, not had enough physical activity. They're the ones that are dealing with our kids for like 6 hours of every day. So they're like wanting for like solutions that will make their life even like 2% easier.
Absolutely.
So I have actually found that teachers and administrators are much more open than people think, even in places that people think, you know, like we had a dad at like a rural school in Alabama, like raise money and switch his daughter's second grade class completely on his own through community donations. And, you know, he thought, oh, I'm in Alabama. It's kind of the sticks. I'm not sure that anyone's going to really be open to this idea. You know, you're in San Francisco. People are hip and progressive there. That is not the case. Like, don't let that stop you. Like teachers are searching for ways to make their classrooms more manageable and easier. So
that's a good point. I actually was along the line of thinking what you just said. I thought it was going to be some kind of like Supreme Court dissertation speech that you'd have to give, you know?
No. And, you know, the issue for most schools is money. Yeah. So if you not only come saying, hey, I got this idea and I, you know, Joe Dad, I'm going to do a Kickstarter or raise some money through StandUp Kids and pay for the desks, and you have to do not one thing, then they're even more excited about it.
That's a really good point.
Right. Yeah. Like this, because often, you know, we'll do our little spiel and then a principal will say to us, well, okay, how much is this going to cost us? And we're like, well, nothing, because we're going to fundraise for it. And then, and they're like, oh, okay, well, I'm in, right? Like, you know, that's how it's sort of been for us. So I think, you know, to anyone who's interested in trying to convert their own kids' classroom or school, do not be intimidated. You know, just arm yourself with a few factoids and sort of a plan to raise a little bit of money. And it is totally possible. And, you know, that's how we think this is going to continue to grow, is organically like this. I mean, we had just one more story. We have a dad down in Tucson, Arizona, and he figured out a way, because he's kind of handy, to just turn his kids' sitting desks into standing desks by like adding these PVC pipe things to them. Wow. And it was for like a total of $12. Like it was like a $12 investment of PVC pipes. And he just was creative and thought, well, you know, I'm not really someone who's going to raise money, but I want my kids to be standing at school. And so every year when his kids advance in school, he just goes in, spends another $12, rejiggers the desks, and they work fine, right? So there's like more than one way to do this.
Yeah. It's great too. So to quote the great Tim Ferriss, and I've never been able to hunt down this exact quote, but he said it so many times and I just love it. So I'm paraphrasing, but it's something like, if we were to bring Winston Churchill back from the dead, the only thing he would recognize about society is the public school system. So what you're saying is, I mean, it's just effort. It's a matter of parents being the change that they want to see in the system.
Yep. So, and I think, you know, we had a great interview on our last podcast season with this guy, Mark Bendon, who's the one who's done a ton of the kids standing desk research. And he basically said that, you know, we need as parents to really start to like fight back against the current trends. Like there needs to be more people who say like, no, it is not okay to serve donuts after my kid's 5-year-old kid's soccer game. And, you know, no, you can't sell Izzy's at school for kids and tell yourself they're healthy. Like there needs to be more parents who are, you know, even if we're the weirdos right now, there needs to be more pushback. And I'm trying in my community, and I think everybody in there, it's got to be done at a community level where it's just about education, really, you know, just being that voice.
You know, I always say this thing that adults are basically little kids in grown-up costumes. And what I find with parents is there's this incredibly strange thing, because I can't picture it because I'm a super alpha, right? But I can't believe the amount of fear when I tell these parents, like, do you know that you can go to your school in person and you can tell the administrators, stop giving my kid feedlot milk? That's not allowed anymore. You can do that. And they're like, well, what do you mean? I can talk to an administrator. Why are you afraid of an administrator? Are they going to give you detention? Like, what do you think is going to happen to you? You
Right.
know?
Right. I think there's really this perception that, like, you know, if you want to get your standing desk in your school, that you're going to have to go to the school board and present and talk to the superintendent, and that there's going to be all these bureaucratic hurdles. But it turns out in most public schools, the actual school, you know, has sort of an independent budget and the ability to make actually a lot of decisions about what happens at their school without getting like bigger approval.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there are exceptions to that where, you know, now I say that and someone's going to, you know, go out and, you know, talk to their local school and face more administrative hurdles. But by and large, it's like, if you get someone at your school to say, yes, okay, you know, the other thing too is, like, I have a friend whose kid has ADHD, and her school, she actually tried, and her school and the administration was not open to standing desks. And she went in and she said, my kid has ADHD. He needs to be standing at school. I bought him a standing desk. It cost her $200. And now her kid moves from class to class with his own standing desk, and he stands there and he's happy as a clam at his standing desk. He loves it.
That's
so
amazing.
I think that's another thing is that, you know, even if you're not the kind of parent who thinks you can do a fundraiser or has any desire to talk to your administration or anything, you know, but you want your own kid to stand, buy him a desk. It's not that expensive. And
be the lead domino. Yeah,
be the lead domino. Buy one desk and say, you know, you have the right as a parent to say, I want my kid to stand at school. I'm going to do a bring your own furniture situation, and I'm bringing my kid a standing desk. You know, and if I had a kid with any kind of attention issue, I would immediately have them in a standing desk.
I agree.
So,
with
you know,
nice fidget bar.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. A fidget bar and a standing desk. So, So yeah, I think we have a lot more influence as parents than we think. You're exactly right.
Okay, so on the grand scheme of things, moving forward, how do people get in touch with you directly? I know I am about to binge your podcast because I'm super embarrassed that I have not done that yet. So,
oh my God, don't be embarrassed.
How they can find you online? Can they connect with you directly? Like, where are you active?
Sure, I am on Instagram, but only for 30 minutes a day at Juliet Starrett. I am on Facebook, Juliet Starrett, although I think I'm getting near my maximum number of friends on Facebook.
You're popular.
But I am on Facebook, Juliet Starrett. We can also be found at StandUp Kids on Instagram, www.standupkids.org, MobilityWOD.org. People can email me if they want, Juliet@standupkids.org. If you have questions or just need like a high 10 support of, you know, going in to talk to your own kid's school. So lots of ways to reach me.
That's beautiful. And I'll put all that in the show notes as well for everybody. And I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart for the work that you're doing. I love the organization, love you as a person. It's fantastic. And now that I know you're focused on research, you can decide how this is going to go. But my plan here was to donate an entire classroom of stand-up desks to you here on the podcast. So now that I know that you're focusing on research, so Clovis is coming back in to help you out in whatever way you need. We can figure out what that goes to. You're very welcome. And I urge anyone listening out there, like she said, once upon a time, it was $5,000 to flip an entire classroom. Seems to be a little bit less now. I would love to see even just one listener come in and match what Clovis is doing here and just be the change that you want to see. So yeah, we'll figure that out after the show.
Thank you, Justin, for your advocacy. And thank you to all your listeners. Any support helps. We're just a small little organization chipping away here.
Absolutely. And I'm hoping that my audience will help do some more chipping. We'll see what happens.
Yeah. And also thank you for having me, Justin. I'm a huge fan of you and all your work you do. And you also are just a fabulous human, which is really all that matters. So
thank you so much. I feel the same way about you, and we'll do this again sometime.
Anytime.
All right. Well, thank you for being here. Have a great rest of the day.
Thanks, Justin.
All right. Bye-bye.